So the first thing to do is to go to aka.ms/mscloud trial. And that gives you the offer of a 1-month trial of Azure with 125 quid to spend. It's $200. You try it, you get 30 days to try it all out. You can try any of these things: virtual machines, SQL databases, websites, Hadoop, all of this stuff. And it's a great way to get started. You will be asked for credit card information, which is used to do an identity check on you. You will not be charged against that credit card. Let me repeat that. You will not be charged against that credit card until at the end of the trial period, if you explicitly remove the spending limit, which is by default set to 0.00. So if you explicitly remove that spending limit at the end of the trial, then you will be billed, and that would become just your normal Azure subscription from that point on. Okay, so once you've got your free trial, then you go to manage.windowsazure.com and you log into the portal. Now I've got one already rolled up here. And this is the portal, and it has all the various things that I've got installed. What we're interested in doing is going to virtual machines and saying I want a new virtual machine. I go to the gallery, and the gallery gives me all sorts of images. There are loads of different images here: SQL Server, BizTalk Server, Oracle servers, different versions of Visual Studio, different Linux versions, and then a whole bunch of Core OS, which is another Linux distribution, and then a whole bunch of further Linux applications, a bunch of sort of enterprise DevOps type applications, and then I've got a list of all the disks that I have in my system for systems I've previously built. So if I go to click this one here and go to Visual Studio, it takes me to the Visual Studio editions, and here we can see Visual Studio Community 2013 running on Windows Server 2012 R2. So the interesting thing about this one is this is the version of Visual Studio that was announced a few weeks ago in New York, which gives you free access to Visual Studio Community Edition if you turn over less than £1 million a year, $1 million per year, sorry, and there are less than 5 developers using the product inside your organization. So for most small businesses, this is going to be a perfect Visual Studio version. It's roughly equivalent to Visual Studio Professional as it is today. So what I do is I say next, and I give this machine a name. So let's call it Visual Studio Community Edition Workstation 1, for example. The best tier to put this in is Basic, because Standard allows you to load balance, and you don't need to load balance a dev workstation. Then I can specify which machine I want to put this onto. So I could put this onto an 8-core machine, and I put my username in here. So this is the username that I want to use to log into the system when I have eventually built it. Okay, I click Next. I have to create a new cloud service for this machine, and by default it takes the machine name. The cloud service is something which gives you a DNS name that you can reference and an internal network. By default it will take the machine name and then do .cloudapp.net. You can actually map this onto a different name using a DNS provider if you want to, but just for a workstation you really don't need to do that. So this machine would be vscews1.cloudapp.net. You then specify where in the world you want to put this machine. So these are the locations. I'm going to put this into North Europe, which is the closest one to me. And then the easiest way to do this is to automatically generate a storage account to store the hard drive file. So the hard drive file is a .vhd file. It's going to be about, I don't know, 30 or 40 gigabytes, something like that, and you need a place to store that data. We won't worry about an availability set, and we have remote desktop that's already installed, so that means you can connect remotely to this machine, and remote PowerShell. So these are the 2 management technologies which are already installed onto the machine, and I click Next. There are various agents which can be installed. I'm not going to bother with any of those. I'm just going to leave the default VM agent, which is recommended for all VMs, and then click Go. Okay, so you can see it says now it's starting the provisioning process, and that will be finished in a few moments' time. So let me use the magic of video editing to speed this whole process up. You can see it's now in the starting state, so it's starting that virtual machine. When it gets into this state, then I can sort of see how it's doing. I can see a dashboard of performance and so on. There's very little to show at the moment because it's still in the process of building. Monitoring allows me to configure that graph, what particular counters I want to have a look at. Endpoints allows me to see what endpoints I've got open, and the configure tab allows me to configure things like the size of the machine and what tier it's in and so on. But let's just wait for that to complete. Let's go back and have a look at it. It says it's still starting. It's now in the state of running, but it's still provisioning, which means it's still not actually available yet. So we'll wait for this stage to finish. And it's finally gone into the running status. So now we can connect to it using RDP. And I click this connect with the machine selected. So I select it here. Don't select it here because it takes you into the details of the machine itself. But go back and select it here. Click the connect button. It says you're going to be opening an RDP file, and it gives me the opportunity to either directly open that, which I can do, and that's very simple to do, but I'm going to save this file to my desktop. I'm going to save it to my desktop as vscews1.rdp, and then I'm going to go onto my desktop, find that file, wherever it is. There it is. And I'm going to right click and edit. I'm going to put in the username that I specified, Planky. I'm going to allow it to save credentials. I'm going to go to local resources, more, and I'm going to say drives. What that means is my local drives on my local system that I'm using to connect to this cloud-based system will appear in the cloud-based system. So any code I've got locally, I can easily copy it to that system. And something which is just useful is to go to the advanced button here and say stop giving me warnings, just connect and don't warn me. If I then go back to the general display and save those changes, then if I close this down, anytime I use this now, which was this one, wasn't it? It will connect, say don't ask me again, it will connect, and it will go straight to the system. It will ask me for my credentials though. I can even say remember my credentials. I'll put the password in. And now it's connected to the system, but this is now going to build my desktop because it's the first time I've connected to this system, so we're going to have to wait a little while for a few things to happen while the desktop gets built. There we go, looks like it's in the process of building it now. And there we go, we've got our desktop. It's asking me whether I want to configure the network or not for local resources. I don't really want to bother with that. And there's my Visual Studio 2013 icon. So if I fire that up for the first time, it's going to go through some configuration, so it'll take a few moments. I'm going to use the magic of video editing to speed that up. Okay, so I need to sign into Visual Studio, so let me do that. And I will use my Microsoft account. And now it's going to set Visual Studio up for the first time. Okay, and now Visual Studio is actually starting. And I'm now in a position where I could actually use it to create an application. So I'm going to show you two things you can do straight away using Microsoft Azure. The first one is to do new project. Let's go to Visual C# and let's look for a web application. So we're going to create an ASP.NET web application. We'll call it Web Application 1. Say OK. We will just do a standard web forms application. It's going to be nothing special. And we will host in the cloud on an Azure website. Okay, so this is set up because the SDK is already installed. Now I need to manage my Azure subscription, so I need to tell it which subscription to use. So I'll come in here, I'll click the sign in button, and this is now informing Visual Studio that I'm going to be using this subscription. Continue. Okay, so I'm not going to use the free trial because that's from some time ago, but I'm going to use my own internal subscription account. Click close, and I'll say OK to this. It's now saying, so your site is going to be called Web Application 17237. Well, let's just call it, should we call it Web Planky 100? Web Planky 100. So it's going to, the name of the website is going to be webplanky100.azurewebsites.net. It says which subscription do you want to use? My internal subscription. You would put your subscription in there. Where do I want to deploy this? Let's go to North Europe. I'm not going to use a database, and I click OK. So what we'll see in Solution Explorer over here, we'll see this solution fill out. Let's wait for that to happen. Okay, that's done. What we see down here, though, on the bottom left, is creating Microsoft Azure website. So it's actually going through the process of creating an Azure website, an empty, naked website, which just has one file saying your website's been created, but it's waiting for me to publish this website in the Solution Explorer into the actual hosted service itself. So it says it's ready now. That means I should be able to go to the web and find it. So I called it Web Planky 100, didn't I? Let's say we'll use the recommended settings. So if I go to webplanky100.azurewebsites.net, we should have an empty website there. There it is. This website has been successfully created. So let me close that down. And now what I want to do is go to the web application itself. Let's have a look at the home page. Here we are. If I show the design of the home page, this will be something you're all familiar with, I expect. Okay, so this is the design of the home page. So let's make a change to this. Let's call it ASP.NET Planky 100. Imagine that was a code change. Now what I can do is publish this site using the web deploy protocol. So I right click and I say publish, and I can publish it directly to the website that the project already knows about. So that it's already got these details in here. I click next. I'm going to go for the release configuration. I click next. It says, would you like to see a preview? Well, I'm pretty confident that this is going to deploy, so I'm just going to click the publish button. So now it's copying all of these files up to the running website. And you can see it says down here in the bottom left, publish started. Let's wait for that to complete. And it should open up a web browser for me and show me this website that has been published to the Azure platform. Here we go. Okay, so that's a change. Let's now close that down. Let's make another change. Let's go back to the default ASPX page. Let's make this planky100.net. Let's just say that. Let's imagine that's a code change. Now that's a change only to one file, isn't it? So when I do the publish this time, it should only be transferring a single file. So if I do publish, it should be much quicker. Let's try. Publish. And it was quicker, and there's the deployed changes. So they could be code changes, they can be just static file changes the way I've done here. Okay, so you can create a website very simply, and if you just continue to develop that website in the way that you always would have, and just right-click publish, then you can get that application published up to that website. The next thing I want to show you is if we close this solution. And let me show you how to create a cloud service. So I'll say new project, C# cloud. I'm going to create an Azure cloud service. We'll call this Planky Cloud 1 and say OK. And I'm going to add into it an ASP.NET web role and a worker role. I'm not going to do very much with these two machines, but I'm just going to add them in. Okay, it's going to create a Solution Explorer package for me. For the ASP.NET application, I'll do it as a web forms application. I'll say OK. Okay, so that's now done, and we can see we've got that's the name of the solution, Planky Cloud 1. There are some roles in there. There's web role 1 and worker role 1. If I look at web role 1, let me just double click that. And let's imagine that I want to have this on a VM size of medium, let's just say, and an instance count, that is the number of servers of, let's have 3 web front-end servers for this application. Let's go into the web role itself. There's the default ASPX page. I'll tell you what we could do here, which would be interesting. Let me open the toolbox. Pin it. What we'll do is we'll get rid of this text and we'll put in here a text box. And then we'll put here a button. Where's that gone? And we'll put here a label. And we'll have some really simple code in the button. If we just double click that and say label 1 dot text is assigned from text box 1 dot text. Okay, so we got just some. All it's going to do, obviously, is just fill the text out with whatever we put in there. So it's very simple code for the web role. Now let's just save those changes away. I won't actually write anything for the worker role because I just want to get through this quickly. But the worker role has an entry point right here, which is called run, and it just writes some trace information which says the worker role is running. So that's what we'll do. There's some other stuff in here, but we don't really need to worry about that. So let's just have that as a worker role which is running, and it's just running the default code in there, which is just basically saying that we're running. Okay, so in order to get this cloud service, which consists of a number of different roles. Oh, sorry, the other thing we can do is go worker role, and we can set that to, let's just say, 2 instances, this time of, shall we say something like, let's make it extra large. Extra large, 8 cores, 14336, that's 14 gigabytes, isn't it? Let's go for that. Save those changes away. And now I go to right click here and I click publish. It says, is this the subscription you want to use to publish to? Yes, I do. Okay, what will I call this? Let's call it Planky Cloud. Which region do I want to publish to? Well, I go to North Europe always. Do I want geo-redundant replication? Yes, I do. Click the Create button. Okay, so now it gets into the cloud service itself. So it's going to be Planky Cloud. It's going to be in a production environment. I'm going to release the build configuration is the release configuration, and the service configuration is the cloud configuration. Over here I've got local, which means for local debug basically, and cloud, which means for release to the cloud. Okay, I won't enable remote desktop because there's some setup that needs to be done with that. Then click next. This is my, my sort of summary, and I click Publish. Okay, so it's now going through the process of building that application, which will consist of a web front end, which is very simple. It's just does one simple job with 3 servers, and a dual server worker role back end, which I've made no modifications to. It's going to do nothing other than just fire up and write into the event log that it started. The publish has started. You can see that down in the bottom left hand corner down here, and we'll wait for that to finish. It takes a few minutes. Okay, so it now says that the publish has succeeded, and we can use the, if I get rid of this and I go into Cloud Services here in Windows Azure, we can see there's my cloud service which has been published, and I should now be able to go to the portal and see what's happening with it. So let's try that. If I go to manage.windowsazure.com, Microsoft.com. Okay, now let's go to the Cloud Services node, and there's my Planky Cloud application. If I click the arrow here and we look at instances, we can see, so it's now been published, but how far has it got in actually deploying the application? So you can see I said I would have 3 web role machines. So there's web role 1 instance 0, that's the first server. There's web role 1 instance 1, that's the second server. Web role 1 instance 2, that's the third server. And I had 2 worker role servers, 0 and 1. So at the moment it's creating those VMs. What that means is it's in the process of provisioning the VMs onto the Azure hypervisor. Eventually it will say it's starting them, and finally they will go into the running state, and then my cloud service with all 5 servers will be a running application. In this case, a very simple application that simply takes some text from a text box and puts it into a label, but nevertheless an application. It could be much more complicated than that, of course. That's just to do with the complexity of the code that I deploy. But the principle for deploying this is exactly the same. You write the code, you hit the publish button, and then it publishes the application to Azure, and then you wait for the VMs to start up, and eventually the application goes into the running state. So let's just wait for that to happen. Can you see here the status has changed, and in some of the machines it's waiting for the status. So you can imagine, you've got things like files having to be copied from where the images are stored to the hypervisor, and then you've got machines that have to be booted up from that image, and then when they've been booted up and they've got things like a system name and so on, they have to be rebooted to get the complete configuration. And then as that happens, they will become more intelligent, and they get to the stage where their networking stack is enabled and the network configuration can be built up. The network adapters can be connected up to the internal network and to the load balancer and so on. And eventually the servers will go into the fully provisioned state. So these interim states that we're seeing are just trying to give us an indication of how far the system is on. It doesn't give us a time indication, it just gives us an indication of the state that each of these systems is in. You can see now 2 of the machines are running, and those are the 2 worker roles. The web role is a little bit more difficult because that's got to have IIS installed onto it, it's got to have the application installed into IIS, and it's got to be connected up to the load balancer, because the web roles will be naturally connected to the load balancer. That's great, we've got 1 of them running, 2 more to go. Interestingly, the fact that 1 of them is running means that the load balancer could be sending requests to it. So should we try it and see if it works? Let's go to the Cloud Services node. There's my Planky Cloud application. Scroll across here. That's the URL. So if I click that URL, it should take me to my running application. Let's see if it works. Yeah. Okay, so let's put something in there, SDFG. Hit the button. Ooh. Hit the button again. and it works. So exactly what we would expect to happen. Great, okay, let's go back here. And let's have a look at the state of that application. Scroll back, Planky Cloud. Let's now look in here. Let's go to instances, and all of the servers are now running. So I've just deployed a 5-server application, and that could have been a 50-server application, a 100-server application. In the case of some of our customers, deploying 45,000 cores. If you look up the case study of Milliman, that's what they are doing on a, I wouldn't say a regular basis, but a reasonably regular basis. So you can do all of this from nothing. All you need is access to the internet and a free Windows Azure trial account. Okay, I hope you have fun with it. Enjoy yourselves.